Welcome, Hoosier fans, to this week's edition of Assembly Call Radio, where each week we discuss the most interesting topics in the world of Indiana basketball. This is our 190th edition of Assembly Call Radio, and it is our 645th episode overall of the Assembly Call, recorded on the evening of Thursday, October 15th, 2020. I am your host, Jerod Morris. And let's begin this edition of the Assembly Call how we begin every edition of the Assembly Call, and that is with our Hoosier Proud banner moment.
And Indiana is the national champion.
When it comes down, Indiana will be champion.
Smart takes the shot.
The Hoosiers have won the national championship.
This week's banner moment occurred on Tuesday when IU's players and coaches met with the media. Friend of the show and legendary sports writer Rick Bozich asked Trace Jackson Davis why Archie Miller was so bullish on this year's group, and Trace's answer provided a great argument for why we as fans should share Archie's excitement about what this group can become. And it comes down to one word: culture. Here was Trace's response, audio courtesy of Inside the Hall.
Everyone from down to the freshmen all the way up to the seniors, everyone likes each other. That's a big part. We all work hard and we hold each other accountable every day. Like last year, I remember there were times where Saturdays we could open and shoot. If you weren't in the gym, it was like common. Then this year, if you're not in the gym on Saturday, it's weird. So like it's just a different vibe this year. It's like everyone's ready to go, especially with an unfinished season last year.
You know, ever since Archie Miller was hired to replace Tom Crean, we've talked about how his most important job is changing a culture that had fallen flat. Well, it's been a little slow going. Baby steps have been taken each season, but the reality is that culture is about people, and a complete culture overhaul was probably never going to be possible without a complete personnel overhaul. Is Archie's fourth year the year when finally the Indiana basketball culture is ready to take 2 full steps forward? When it gets back to being the hard-nosed, together, basketball-loving, obsessed with winning culture that we as IU fans expect? Well, talk is cheap in the offseason, so the jury is out until the games start. But Trace's comments give us a hint that maybe, just maybe, this will finally be the year. And the bottom line is that given the results Archie has turned in during years 1 through 3, it sure better be. All right, now let me introduce my esteemed co-hosts for this week's show. First off, to my left.
He remembers the days when a movie cost $1. Heaven help you if you ever decide to pop your collar. Play hard, but remember, fake hustle is a crime. He's the coach and it's Townsend time.
Talking about practice?
Coach, it's Townsend time. What's on your mind?
Practice. Practice is on my mind. The guys were in the gym, and they were practicing, and they were doing drills, and they were going up and down the court. They were installing offense, installing defense, and that's what we've waited a long time since that crazy time in March where it all ended too soon, and we didn't get a chance to continue the Big Ten tournament and NCAA tournament. So it's nice to know the guys are practicing. It was really nice to see them on media day. I agree with you. You know, everyone's media day is positive across the country. Every team's, gotten bigger, stronger, and worked out well, and all the coaches like their teams right now, and it has to be carried over to the games and results. And that's ultimately what we need to see. We need to get those games going so we can talk about those results. But there's a lot of we and not me attitude in that media day, as you mentioned. And it just seems that as a coach, you always teach culture and you always team a good team togetherness, but sometimes it just happens, and it happens because of those personnel. And so if that is true and carries over throughout the season, the ups and downs and the adverse moments, then I think we have something to look forward to, and I think we do regardless with this roster.
Absolutely. All righty. And to my right.
Analyzing players, finding every wrinkle. He hasn't ever hosted, never lifted a finger. He's got all the answers.
Well, let me quickly add just one thing about this.
Dude just interrupted his own jingle.
Oh, no, I'm sorry. Ryan is not here. But Matt Patricia, what is your rant on the last week in IU sports?
Don't insult me. I am not that incompetent.
Oh, I'm sorry. I just the beard and the hat. I got
you. But it's not backwards, so it doesn't work. Well,
that was when you came on here. That's when I thought.
Yeah, I don't have a pen in my ear. Anyway, I thought obviously from media day, there were some really interesting things to come out. I love the idea of them playing smaller and faster. And that's something we've kind of asked IU to do for a while. They started two bigs last year, and I think we'll get some of that this year. But I think that the idea of maybe putting Christian Lander in there and having some, running some pick and roll, and maybe having Race Thompson or Jerome Hunter play the 4 and creating a more up-tempo offense that can also guard at all 5 positions is a really interesting move for this roster, and I think it's the right one. And I think that while that may not be the starting lineup, and it may not be the lineup that a smaller lineup may not be the lineup they go to the most, being able to break out and run a little bit at points in the game, especially in the Big Ten, and get some cheap points when those are harder to get in the Big Ten, is, I think, the right move, and I think that will benefit IU too. And if this is a team with athletes, and there are athletes on this roster, if they can get out and run and get some cheap baskets, I think it's gonna really benefit, especially with the way a guy like Trace runs the floor. You get the ball up and down, you can get some easy buckets with him.
Yeah. All right. Well, there is a lot to talk about this week, which is a nice little change. After a couple months where it didn't feel like there was a whole lot of news, I would like to thank the college basketball gods for the show that I'm coming back to, giving us so much to talk about. We got big rule changes in college hoops. The captains were announced literally moments before we went live. And then, of course, we've got Media Day to react to your questions. So this is going to be a jam-packed show. We're very glad that you're here with us. All that coming this week on Assembly Call Radio. Before we get to that, just a quick reminder, go to homefieldapparel.com, support our friends there. You can always use your promo code Assembly20 to get 20% off your entire order. This weekend is another one of their big new Saturdays, I believe, from the little hints that they've been putting out there, that it's Louisville gear that they're going to be putting out. So, we don't really support Louisville, but if you're maybe going to troll a Kentucky fan, then it's okay to get Louisville gear, and certainly it's okay to do it at homefieldapparel.com, where you should go. Coach, have you made any mega purchases lately? We know you have an itchy trigger finger on their website.
I have 7 items in the cart, and I keep adding every Saturday. And once I transfer a balance from savings, yes, I'm going to be buying.
Is Mrs. Townsend going to take away your credit card and just not allow?
No, my mom's actually going to reimburse me for my birthday, so it's going to be birthday, Christmas gifts from Mom. So
very nice.
I feel pretty good about that.
Hey, Christmas is coming up. Shop early at Home Field Apparel, and again, use that promo code Assembly20. It's always 20% off. All right, guys, let's dive into the news because there's a ton of it, and let's start with the news that broke right before we went live. The captains. Basically, all the upperclassmen, your senior class, your junior class, they are all captains. Race Thompson, Al Durham, Rob Finney, Joey Brunk, all 4 guys seem like good choices as captains. I do just want to get your guys' thoughts on having so many captains. And instead of just having the seniors, Al and Joey, pulling Rob and Race in there too. Coach, what does that suggest to you about what Archie Miller's strategy is for choosing these captains?
Well, I was surprised that there's 4. Sometimes you could have too many people in leadership roles. But more than that, once I sat back and thought about it a little bit, I think that speaks to the volume of what you said in the banner moment and the whole, kind of media day atmosphere of where they're in on Saturdays. This team seems together. And when you acknowledge your seniors and juniors for being here and creating that culture and learning with the captain position, I think that just speaks volumes for that this team is going to be 11 guys fighting in practice, fighting on the court to try to win as many games as possible. At least that's the hope that I have from my vantage point. And I think all those guys are deserving. I think really for a guy like you have the seniors, obviously, who've really worked hard. But for Race, again, a guy that's not a big offensive person, that speaks for how hard he plays. And Rob being the point guard, he's been up and down with injuries, and I think that pushes him a little bit too to get with the program as much as he possibly can. I'm not saying he wasn't, but really to up his play and up his mental toughness to a point of strong leadership. So it can work in both ways. It could be good leadership for the team and also put pressure on these guys to make sure they're doing things the right way as well.
And as Joel mentioned in the chat, that might have been voted on by the players too. I think that's been done in the past. Although, in my experience, coaches usually don't let guys become captains who they don't want to become captains.
Or they strongly encourage. They strongly encourage who it should be, and it winds up going there.
Yes.
Al was captain.
Interesting.
Al was captain last year, right? I'm not completely making that up. He was one of the 2 captains last year.
Yes.
Right?
Alan Devontae, I believe.
It was Alan Devontae.
Mm-hmm.
So he was going to be a captain, no question. You don't stop being a captain. So Al is makes sense. Joey, from everything we heard last year, was a leader on and off the floor. Regardless of his play on the floor, he was a leader on and off the floor from the second he stepped on campus. You figured as a senior he was going to be a captain. I was kind of surprised he wasn't one last year, given everything we heard behind the scenes, but he just hadn't been there very long. Race, everything we've heard during the lockdown and everything and this summer was how much he was leading off the court with the issues of social racial justice and all of that stuff. We heard all kinds of stuff about how much leadership he was showing and how vocal he'd been and all of that stuff. That doesn't surprise me that I know he's not a guy who's contributed very much on the floor over his first couple of years because of injury and all of that stuff, but it doesn't surprise me at all that he got picked. And then Rob is going to be your starting point guard, and typically the starting point guard is one of the captains. And so all of this, it may seem like a lot of guys, but all of it makes sense given the individual situations of each guy and what we've heard about them. So, I think that it's great. I don't think that, I don't think 4 is too many captains because especially given this team's injury history, there could be guys who aren't on the floor certain days. And, you want to have captains on the floor pretty much at all times. And so not surprising to me that I figured they were going to do 3. It's not surprising to me that it wound up being 4. So especially given who the people are. Al's a returning captain. Joey was a leader last year on and off the floor from the second he stepped on campus. Doesn't surprise me at all. Rob Finney being your starting point guard doesn't surprise me at all. And then Race Thompson, I think, kind of earned it over the last couple months with who he's been. So none of that, again, surprises me.
The only other thing I will say is those 4 guys were chosen as captains, all deserving. That's all great. This team's best player is Trace Jackson Davis. Yeah. And if Indiana is going to go where it needs to go, he's going to have to lead one way or the other. So he's an underclassman. I get not making him a captain, but certainly he's a guy who needs to act and think like a captain.
Sure. And
just based on some of his comments so far, it appears that he is, which is good to see. Let's talk about Blue Ribbon, guys. On the good, they named Trace Jackson Davis a third-team preseason All-American, which I'm seeing more and more of that for Trace, which is nice to see that recognition. However, the fine folks at Blue Ribbon decided to pick Indiana 8th. And, look, there is a defensible
Blue
way.
Ribbon? What the hell?
No, look, there's an argument to be made for Indiana at 8th. Like, you could make that argument. You cannot make that argument if you have Rutgers and Minnesota over Indiana, okay? Because as I tweeted earlier this week, I did not get an NCAA tournament canceled and sit through this offseason just to come back and have Indiana finish behind Rutgers and Minnesota. That is not happening. We won't allow it. There's no way, all right? Look, it's fine. Everybody's excited about Rutgers, but Minnesota? They have Marcus Carr and what, like a transfer or something? Come on. If we finish below those 2, just cancel it all. Cancel everything. It's not happening. So that's all I want to say about that. Do you guys have any thoughts on Blue Ribbon?
No, I think, well, you got to look at the strength of the conference, too. Andy Katz had us ranked 18th, but 7th in the Big Ten. If you tell me we're the 18th best team in the country, I'm pretty happy with that. So we got to be aware of, last year Michigan and Ohio State were 7 and 8. And I thought those teams were pretty decent teams. It just was very competitive. Our expectations are being 3, 4, 5 at the worst, if not challenging for the Big Ten championship. Is this roster ready to do that? We'll find out. But if you can guarantee me a top 5 or 6 seed, regardless of place in the Big Ten tournament, I'm taking that right now. And the other thing is, I think sometimes we see things a little differently, obviously, with our rose-colored glasses, but they also look at all of our guys haven't reached their ceiling yet. There's a whole lot of potential, and I know it's just floating out there yet, and they have to do it on the court. But our floor is 7th or 8th, in my opinion. And I think if the improvement is there that we hope and what we believe the players can be, then we're going to challenge to move up. So I don't get too bothered by Blue Ribbon or Street and Smith or Lindy.
Red ribbon, green ribbon, who cares?
Yeah,
No, I what I will say about that is I think there's a very real scenario where there's 9 really good teams in the Big Ten this year, just looking at the rosters. And so
we better be one of the top 4 or 5 of them.
I'm
tired of us being like
right.
7th or 8th, but the Big Ten's really good. Like
No, I'm saying, if Blue Ribbon's looking at it and sees 3 games we might lose close, and that would drop us down to 8, I think those are games that we might win this year and move, and that could be the difference between 4th and 8th. You look how close this conference is. I mean, you might get that a team like Michigan State, doing really well and being far above everyone else, but have the next tier all be within 2 games. That could legitimately happen. And I think that's the thing that'll be interesting about this year of the Big Ten. I think it's going to be loaded.
Without the schedules coming out too, the unfair thing is the unbalanced schedule. You know, if your twofers are the 4 best teams in the league, and you only play the bottom feeders once, and then a team like Minnesota or Rutgers has the opposite, that's really not a fair comparison. That's why, since I've started bracketology, the placing in the conference has not meant as much as to me as it has been as a fan. Simply because the unbalanced, you find the winners of the Big Ten, and they usually have the easier Big Ten schedules or one of the easier schedules. It helps. They're talented, they're good, but they've had some schedule breaks, and that's Wisconsin and even Michigan States of the world. So until we see the schedule, I'm not too concerned.
We just need to be in the top 4 or 5 of the Big Ten. We need to compete for the Big Ten this year.
Yeah,
I hear everything you're saying. I'm just, you know who doesn't worry about the schedule ahead of the season? Michigan State.
Yeah.
So
No, I could see us being 5th and being within a game of the top. You know what I mean? Like that top tier is going to be very close. But yeah, IU needs to win some of the games over the last few years they've lost that have dropped them. You know, I mean, if IU could have made a 3 last year in certain games, had 1 reliable shooter, they probably win 4 more games. You know, that's how bad it was. And so this team needs to be able to do that.
Okay. Last topic I want to hit here before we start talking about media days. There's some pretty big rule changes. Number 1 is all winter athletes are going to get an extra year of eligibility. So what that essentially means is everyone in college basketball this year is redshirting. So if Joey Brunk or Al Durham want to come back and play, and Indiana will have them, they can come back and play another year. And as far as I understand it, at least listening to Gary Parrish and Matt Norlander talk about it earlier today on the Ion College Basketball podcast, if you have 2 seniors that want to come back, you would essentially get 15 scholarships for next year.
Yeah, they have to do that. They have to do that.
So it'll be interesting to see, what happens with that and how that affects recruiting. Curious, Ryan, to get your quick thoughts on that. It's the right decision, but what are maybe some of the consequences that we could see?
Well, I think there's 2 things here, and one of them is that those people didn't get to finish their last year. You get to finish last year, and so that's part of it. And then you only get what is going to be like 2/3 of the season this year at best. So yeah, that's the right decision. If Joey and Al want to come back, I mean, some kids, it's not even about wanting to compete for a championship. Of course they want to, but some kids, you've outgrown college at some point. And I think that guys are going to have to make their own decision based on that. If they want to come back and run it back, I think that'd be great. And you have expanded rosters for a year. I'm happy that the NCAA has said that their scholarships essentially won't count towards the overall count. I think that's essentially how they're going to have to treat it, is those scholarships just don't count towards the overall number. And that's the right thing to do, to give them that option. And you're also going to have guys who opt out of this year for coronavirus concerns, and they should be automatically given an extra year, as most conferences have said they're going to do. I'm glad the NCAA is on board with that. We'll see what happens as far as IU's guys getting another and exercising another year. But, I think it's the right move and it's the right decision for everybody. The question I had now, if all winter athletes get an extra year of eligibility, a guy like Jerome Hunter and Race Thompson, who've missed time for injury, do they just extend their college eligibility? It looks like that rule would apply as well to them.
Do they get the extra year and then a medical red shirt on top of that? Do they get the Jess Settles program?
I would imagine that gets ruled out because they get the extra year. Yeah. But Race Thompson, he's a 4th year junior. I mean, he technically could be a senior right now. I mean, he obviously enrolled early, but he hasn't played very much. So essentially giving him 2 more years of college, one after this and then the next year, is great for him because he gets a chance to be around longer and show it off. So that's what it looks like to me would mean more than the seniors. It's some of these guys who've been injured and really struggled potentially get to tack on an extra year without having to apply for a medical redshirt.
Coach, any thoughts on this?
Yeah, I think it's the right thing to do for the student athlete. It does present some interesting things from a program when you have 15 players, 16 players, depending on who comes back, and the playing time issues. On a positive, it will give you a chance if you have some guys coming in that you'd like to redshirt. You could redshirt them with the incoming freshmen because you still have your almost same team coming back the next year. So that gives you some flexibility for those programs who wanted to do that. But it is tough. There's only one basketball on game night sometimes in 15 guys. So it's a positive. It's the right thing to do. Coaches are going to have to figure out the right way to manage adding scholarships. But Indiana's in a good spot, too, because we have open scholarships. We have 11. So we add 3 or 4 recruits. You're really not too far from a normal season. I think Indiana's poised well to move forward doing the right things for their student athletes.
And we get 5 years of Trace Jackson Davis.
Right, exactly, because he's definitely going to hang around. Why wouldn't he?
That's a joke. That is a joke.
I like to clarify.
I know. I just want to make sure. There's one more rule change, but let's hit that in the next segment. So coming up, we're going to talk about the other big rule change that happened, the transfer rule, how that will affect things. And then we got to talk about Media Day. We got extensive comments from Archie Miller, from the players. We'll discuss what stood out the most to us. Stick with us here on the Assembly Club. All right.
Marcelo Zuna just took Clayton Kershaw deep, so the Phillips household is very happy right now.
Not a Kershaw fan, huh? Just kidding.
No, I'm not a Dodgers fan. That's what it is. They're a rival. I mean, I want them to lose. Of course I do.
No.
I'm not one of these people who's like, oh no, I want my division to do well once my team's out. I hope Purdue goes really far in the NCAA tournament because they're a Big Ten team. No, screw that. They're my
You're cheering for
rival.
the Big Ten in the NCAA tournament?
No.
I don't cheer for Purdue, but I like the
for
other.
rivals. I don't mind if rivals, but
Okay.
I'm talking about rivals. Like if Michigan State wins a national title, I don't care. I mean, they'll continue to beat us in recruiting if they do that. But it was. I do remember the year that I was at the Final Four, and Michigan State was Michigan State and versus Duke, and Kentucky versus Wisconsin, and I was like, Michigan State's the only team that wins this national title where I don't feel dirty. And then, of course, Duke waxed Michigan State. Wisconsin beat Kentucky. I was hoping it would be Wisconsin and Michigan State would be Wisconsin. But no, it wound up being Wisconsin and Duke. And I was like, I'm not going to be happy either way this goes. And Duke won because officials didn't call fouls in the second half.
And why didn't they? Do you have a story about that?
I do. Coach K was screaming at the officials at halftime in the tunnel. And then I had a buddy who was there covering it. I had 3 people text me with that story because they knew I was in the building. And one of them said, they're not going to call a single foul on Duke in the second half. You watch. I witnessed it. It was bad. It's not going to happen. And then the foul disparity in the second half was something egregious. I don't remember what it was, but it was insane. And Frank Kaminsky was getting mauled underneath the hoop and nothing.
The worst human being on the planet.
Yeah.
You were talking about him at that time.
Was I?
Yes. You were.
I want to know
the Darth Vader of college basketball teams.
That part is true.
Yes.
I don't remember the full context of the worst human being on the planet because clearly my ideas on that have moderated slightly. In that moment, I believed it. I promise I believed it in that moment.
No, we know you did. Okay, so
Is that scholarship rule? Does it roll over, or after 1 year do you have to go back to 13?
I would bet they expand it for the seniors this year, and then
because everyone redshirts, that throws a kink into recruiting at some point continuously, right?
I bet they'll amend it as it goes, and maybe do it as a team by team basis. Like if you were on the roster when we created this rule, you get to stick around, and then your senior year, the scholarships are off the books, or something like that. Because that's essentially what they're doing is ignoring.
But you're ignoring this year, but you're adding a 5th class into a mix that's going to be there for 4 years, in essence, unless you leave early or something like that. It just dawned on me as we were signing off that segment that this is not just a 1 year.
Yeah.
extension, it's going to be at least a 4-year extension if everyone, because Leo could play 5 years now.
Mm-hmm.
You know, Geronimo 5 years unless they leave early or whatever. You're talking about getting old and staying old.
Mm-hmm.
Archie drew that. You know, you don't draw this up, but
I wonder. Do you think anybody will redshirt off this group?
No,
I
not
don't
not
think
if we
so.
only
Not-
have 11 players.
yeah.
I can't see it. I mean, yeah, I don't know. My guess would be no, because again, only 11 players, and to me, like Leal would be the guy probably to redshirt, but he brings shooting that might be useful. And so,
I was going to say that, Jerod. Each person brings something unique in that freshman class.
yeah,
That could,
they're very different
Not used
players.
every game, but maybe
Yeah.
this game it's a Trey Galloway game. This game it's an Anthony Leo game. And I think those are assets that would be nice to use as long as you communicate that to your players that you may not play for 2 games, but we play a zone team. Leo, you better be ready to go or
Yeah.
No,
and
Archie's
why I
not going to
don't think-
redshirt one of his best defenders, so Galloway's not
No.
getting redshirted.
Yeah, no,
And
what I-
Geronimo's
what I-
one of the best athletes. So.
I said, I
Right.
think it was last week. I said, maybe it was in the chat. I don't know if I said it on the air or in the chat, where I said, dude, I just want for one stretch, because you can play a couple games and still redshirt now. That's the rule. It's not like it used to be where if you played it all, you can redshirt. It's a percentage of games or whatever it is. And in football, you can play 4 games at any time during the year and still redshirt.
So if you redshirt, do you get 6 years?
I don't
Otherwise,
know, Coach.
like someone
We're
in
going to go down a rabbit hole where
you might as well
where-
play them all because
we're
it's a redshirt year anyway for everyone.
We're going to go
Everyone's
down a
getting
rabbit hole
redshirted.
where suddenly Anthony Leal can be on campus for 10 years. Like if you just add all these things.
Bring it.
But I said at one point, I would love at some point, maybe during early season, to see all the freshmen on the floor at the same time and just let them run.
Yeah, I remember
Don't
that.
run offense, just run. Just do the AAU thing.
No,
Because those
Ryan,
guys know each other so well.
Absolutely.
TJD and is the 5th one. Just
We've
run.
talked about that at the high
Just
school
5
level.
minutes.
Having a 2-minute squad where all you do is go press and helter-skelter, trap all over the place, run and shoot. You give me 2 of the hardest minutes in the game. We'll pick it in the second quarter whenever we need that juice.
Yeah.
You go just crazy. Foul, do
Leal
whatever you
on
want.
the
then
wing,
come out.
Geronimo on another. You get Galloway cutting back door,
Just
and you
fire
get
away.
Lander just running the point. Like, come on, that would be so fun. Just run a simple pick and roll, and everybody else goes to a wing. I mean,
I see Megan is in the chat mob. I'm
Yeah.
here listening. What is it? 2012 again?
seriously.
Back to the future.
All right, let's get into this and let's talk the transfer rule real quick, and then we'll get into media day stuff. Okay, you guys ready?
Yep.
Okay. 28. Okay. Here we go.
Hey guys, it's Gene Steratore, CBS officiating analyst and retired Big Ten basketball official. You know I have never listened to the assembly call, and to be honest, I don't intend to. But if you listen, make sure you ignore anything Ryan says about officiating. He's really good from the seat of his pants, but I wouldn't trust him on the court with a whistle around his neck. Time has proven him wrong on virtually everything. Take care. We'll talk soon.
That will never not be funny. Welcome back to the Assembly Call. You can find all of our content at our website, assemblycall.com. And if you ever want to join the chat mob,
Chat mobbers.
during our unedited live broadcast or watch those replays and see all the between segment banner, then check out our YouTube channel, youtube.com/assemblycall. I'm Jerod Morris. I'm here with Coach Brian Tonsoni and Ryan Phillips. And guys, let's go back and pick up one more rule change before we dive into talking about the media day stuff, and that is the transfer rule. So this is going to be voted on in January. It is expected to go into effect August 1st, 2020. Players will basically be allowed one transfer where they don't have to sit out a year. And there are some different stipulations about when you have to notify coaches by. You have to be in good academic standing when you transfer. If you take this opportunity to transfer without sitting out, then you can't grad transfer later. So there's some different stipulations on it. But essentially what we've been talking about, you want to transfer, Demezy Anderson's transferring to Loyola, he can play immediately. You don't have to get a waiver, none of that stuff. You can just play. I think from previous conversations, we support this rule change, but obviously it's going to have some effects. So, Coach, as you look at this, positives and negatives of this rule change likely going into effect.
Well, positives. These rules should be for the student athletes. And we've gotten too far away from taking care of the student athletes with the amount of money and exposure and all the decisions that are made in the NCAA athletics. So any rule that helps the student athlete, and if a student goes to a college and doesn't like it, they can transfer to a college as long as they're accepted. But a basketball player, a football player, they have to sit out. So I think it's good for the student athletes. Honestly, though, there are some problems, and I think it's more for your smaller conferences where their best players might get poached and they don't have to go and sit out a year. You get someone in the Missouri Valley or even a smaller conference who really busts out as a freshman and sophomore. That coach really worked hard to recruit that young man and build that young man in a program, and there's not that 1 year sit out that helps him keep that player. That is going to be something that coaches are just going to have to adjust and build around that and really look at that and maybe sell that as a reason to get some of those other types of players into the program at a young age to those smaller programs. But that is a problem of player movement. And the other thing is, not everyone's happy, and you can't keep everyone happy as a coach. And the ease of transferring in this day and age just kind of makes that a little problematic. But I think it's best overall.
Ryan, your thoughts on the rule change?
Look, I am definitely pro player in all of these things. We've well established that. I think you are too, Jerod, and Coach. Whatever. I'm just kidding. But but I think we're all very pro player. And I think that look, kids make mistakes. These are 17, 18-year-old kids when they're making these decisions for the most part. And they make mistakes on where they go. And they make mistakes with who they pick as a coach, and they make mistakes on can they live that a certain distance from home or too close to home or whatever. I think that we should allow people to make mistakes. And I think that we need to try this for a while. And if it turns out that it's just free agency in college sports and it's too much and it's not working and it's not addressing the concerns it needs to address, then maybe you reverse it. But I think this is the right move for now. And I don't think it will be a problem, but I think it's worth trying. And I think that you've seen a lot of kids get sold a bill of goods in recruiting, show up on campus and be treated differently than they were. And again, these are kids when they're making these decisions, and they make wrong decisions and trust the wrong people a lot. And so I think that it's anything that makes it better for the kid, in my opinion, considering how many people are making money off of them, how many people are using them to move to their next career move, how many of them are we expect a kid to be committed to a school for 4 years or 5 years even, and coaches can leave whenever they want with no penalty. I mean, there's all of those things that I think need to be considered. A lot of kids will sign with the school for an assistant coach, and assistant coaches change jobs all the time. There's different, factors here. And I think that we need to be willing to allow these kids to move more freely. It will also lead to coaches maybe treating them better and to schools treating them better because, hey, we want to keep this kid around. Let's treat him like we really need him and like, we want him to be around.
All right, let's talk media day. Obviously, we don't get a lot of chances to hear from Archie, to hear from the players, and we did this week. And a couple of things really stuck out. And, I want to get your guys' thoughts on this. There was a lot of talk about more pick and rolls, like a lot of talk about kind of the offense changing. And it really sounds like more pick and rolls. Essentially, as I heard it, it sounded to me like obviously Trace is your best player. Chris Orlander is your most talented playmaker. Let's put in some offense that really kind of builds on and revolves around what those guys do the best. And so, you definitely heard that. And look, that's still going to help Rob. It's going to help Al. It's going to help everybody. If you get a more dynamic offense, a more up-tempo offense, an offense that's playing with more pick and roll with guys who can actually do it. And obviously that's a strength of what Christian brings to the table. And the other thing that really stood out is Archie talking about Jerome Hunter and how Jerome really looks like Jerome again. And it wasn't just Archie talking about Jerome, but also if you listen to what Jerome said, he talked about the coaching staff really trusting him more. The last year the coaching staff didn't trust him. And and look, part of that, he was on a bit of a minutes restriction. I think part of that trust was not just Jerome as a player, but what his body could handle. And so while no one has said Jerome is cleared to play 35 minutes a game or whatever, it does sound like he's kind of more ready to just take on a normal role and just be able to handle whatever he can handle. And Archie's exact quote, I think, was Jerome is back to being Jerome. And if he is that dynamic, confident guy that we saw in high school and that we saw in flashes last year, it changes the entire complexion of this team. So again, talk on media day is cheap, but those two things really stood out to me, in addition to the culture stuff, as things that really, when you look for reasons for optimism, things that you can grasp onto. Coach, what were the biggest items for you from media day?
Those two were easy to find and catch, and then freak athlete. It was mentioned several times about Geronimo. I'd rather hear freak athlete from his teammates and see, the Instagram videos or pictures of what they've done in the weight room. But no, I think the trust factor is interesting too. When you get back to playing the way you are capable of playing, the coach is going to trust you more on game night. It's not a personality thing, trust. It's just, can you play at the level that we expect you to play? And it's hard for first-year players. It's hard for first-year players who are injured. But Jerome is a talent. And now to have him back, and the key thing for me, Jerod, was he said that he has the love of the game back. And when you're injured and you love the game and you can't participate for a year, and then you come back and your body doesn't allow you to do what your mind wants you to do, that can really eat at a high-level athlete. And if he's loving the game again, that means that everything's flowing and he'll get the best out of his ability. So I think that's pretty good. The offense is going to be fun. A little more downhill is what I'll say about the offense. We can shoot a little bit, not great, but we have the post play. We missed a little downhill action, and maybe with Lander and the pick and roll, we can go downhill. So it was good media day for a lot of reasons. But I'm really excited about Hunter and think he'll be a big piece. As long as he can defend, he'll be out there for 20, 25 minutes, I believe.
Have you ever gotten the impression that Archie wants to play faster? Has he ever given you that impression during games at all? The other thing that I would say, Ryan, that Archie mentioned is a real focus on turnovers. And to me, this is really astute for a couple of reasons. One, we've talked about how this team profiles to be a little bit less reliant on the offensive rebound than they were in two of Archie's first 3 seasons, because they couldn't shoot and they had to just manufacture more opportunities. And offensive rebounding really did that when you're playing with 3 non-shooters, and you're missing a lot of shots. You need to get a lot of those offensive rebounds. So Indiana's not going to do that, so they've got to reduce turnovers to increase that shot volume. And, Coach, to your point, if you're going to play faster and you're going to entrust the offense a lot to a freshman, who is reclassified, he's going to turn the ball over. Think back to what DJ Carton did in Bloomington last year when he turned the ball over 7 times. Like, Lander is going to be spectacular, and he's going to struggle. Like, freshmen do that. Freshmen who reclassified especially do that. I think it's perfectly fair to have high expectations for a guy that talented, but I think Archie understands that playing faster, you got to still play under control. And that's where I think Rob is going to be so important. Al is going to be so important, in allowing Christian to be Christian, make mistakes, and make spectacular plays. But I really think limiting that turnover number, to me, that says Rob and Al, you guys have to really take care of the ball. Because the freshman, Lander's going to turn it over, and if you're not going to be okay with that, then don't play him. Yeah. So I think you're going to be okay with that. So that really says to me that the other guys really have to focus on, and as juniors and seniors and captains, that's a fair expectation. They've really got to focus on taking care of the ball.
Yeah, and I think that's true. And I think that when you play faster, the tendency is you're going to turn the ball over more. The key is going to be if you're not going to get as many offensive rebounds as you said, which I think they'll get some. I think with Race Thompson and Trace Jackson Davis, they're going to do okay on the offensive glass. They won't dominate, but they'll do okay, and you'll get those extra possessions. But the key is if you are playing faster and you're not getting as many extra possessions from offensive rebounds, you can't waste the ones you are getting with turnovers. And so high assist.
I feel like we saw that for a few years.
Yeah, and it was not fun. Another thing I'll say, and Coach said something about playing downhill, and what I always was taught growing up, if you're taking a screen at the top or you're moving the ball side to side, you can't just go side to side. You have to at some point turn the corner and go towards the basket. You can't just go dribble side to side, dribble side to side, dribble side to side. That's very easy to defend. You guys can switch, or they can just play you horizontally. They don't have to worry about shuffling their feet backwards. We need guards who can turn the corner. Rob Finnessy at times has shown that when he turns the corner and gets into the lane, he can finish really well. Christian Lander's a guy who's going to turn the corner. Now, he might be hesitant as a freshman when he starts out because of the physical defending and the physical nature of the Big Ten, but he's going to be a guy who can turn the corner off a pick and roll, and not sort of wander out on the perimeter. Once these guys start going north and south, once they start turning the corner off of that, getting it off the wing and dribbling instead of just going flat. And once they turn the corner uphill or downhill, this offense could be scary because of the athletes surrounding them. And guys.
Al got back to doing it in the second half of last year too.
It clicked with Al, and at times you saw it click with Finney, where he would get it and see the lane. And it's kind of a thing when you're doing it. And I, having played, I remember this, is that when you see that lane open up, it looks like a highway, to the hoop. It feels, it could be a foot wide, but it feels like a highway. And you just start funneling in there. And then when it closes off, that means somebody has come to help, which means somebody's open, and you're able to move the ball. And so I just think that that's the key, is this team finding guys who can turn the corner. Al did it last year. You're right. Will he be consistent this year? Rob Finney, when he's done it, has been really successful for Indiana. And Christian Lander, you watch his high school film, that's what he does, is he gets the ball moving north and south. And so that's going to be a big factor for these guys is when they start turning that corner. And if this team can turn the corner, it's going to open up a lot of things offensively.
And the guard-oriented offense, Jerod, speaks to your turnovers. We had guys that played the shooting guard and the small forward 22 minutes and 30 minutes that have left the program, and they had 91 assists to 102 turnovers that have left the program.
It's not good, Coach.
Not good. But you also had Durham and Finney, whose turnovers were too high last year, but they had assists. They had, Durham 80 assists and Finney 93. So their assist to turnover ratio wasn't horrible. But that has absolutely got to be a key no matter what you do. Downhill, pick and roll, faster pace. Those guys got to get better, as you said, to cover for that freshman point guard who is. But playing guards that really can handle the basketball and make decisions is going to bring that down automatically. And I think that's a little bit, Coach isn't going to come and say we're better off because these three players came in and these three players left, but Coach will hint where he thinks he's better. And I think he's better because he has more guards that can handle the basketball, and he veiled that in turnovers. And I think that was a good point to bring up. And Armaan, I was really impressed with his interview. And he said he wanted to bring that downhill mentality. Someone asked what you could bring to this team. He said, get into the basket. And I really think the more I'm thinking about this team, the more I think Armaan's going to come in and move from the 12, 13 minutes to 20 and really be able to be that tough defender he never shied away from a shot, took some bad ones, but never shied away. And he was aggressive. On the break, he got out faster than Finney at sometimes, and he didn't shy away from going downhill either. Boy, if he can make that leap, that's a big if till the games. Talk is cheap, as you said. But Armaan, watch for Armaan to really be a key to Indiana's success.
Even if he doesn't make a leap, if he takes a step, he's going to be a really useful player because of what he can do defensively. Like, he helps you make up for the loss of Justin Smith defensively because he's versatile. Now, he's not as big, but he can take on some different defensive matchups that if you're playing a three-guard lineup, you might need that versatility. The other thing I will mention about Al is, he had a really high free throw rate as a freshman because he was very aggressive. Obviously, last year he was second in the Big Ten. He really was going downhill, getting to the basket. It really dropped off as a freshman. And the reason why is obviously the entire offense was running through Romeo, and Al was very deferential.
You mean as a sophomore, right?
I'm sorry, yes, as a sophomore. So that will be interesting to me now as a senior and a guy who's been around the block and who really showed confidence in his offensive game, and his coach showed confidence in him. Now you throw a guy like Lander into the mix when they are on the floor together. Is everything running through Lander? Is Al kind of more deferential, or is he going to pick his spots and still play his game? And I obviously hope the answer is the latter because I think he proved to be a very capable, versatile offensive player last year. That's why my new nickname for Al is Honorable Mention Al, because he's going to be Honorable Mention All Big Ten this year. I'm just throwing that out there right now. No,
put it on the board.
I tell you, I was thinking earlier today, man, no one falls in love with the narrative of a senior guard like Jerod Morris, do they? Every single year. But you know what? And I'm not going to apologize for that. You give me 4 years, and I'm going to have your back as a senior. That's all I'm going to say.
Well, also, Jerod, he's really impressing too because he wasn't recruited by Archie, and he's the only one left, and he stuck it out, and he's been a captain for 2 years, and his game has improved in many areas. Yes, he struggles defensively, and I don't think he's going to be a real go-to guy. If he's the go-to guy, Indiana's going to be a little bit in trouble. But he's a good second, third option, and he's really worked hard to buy into what Archie has done. And you got to give credit to him for sticking with it and being a leader and being a big part of this team. So I'm really looking forward to him this year as well.
I mean, he's your best shooter, and he's the ball handler who's proven he can get to the line. So, I mean, he brings a lot to the table is what I mean. Now, I look at him as a role player, but I think with what Trace can do and the attention that Lander is going to bring and how he's going to be able – the offense is just going to be more kinetic when Lander's on the court. That's all going to help Al. And I think he's going to be the beneficiary. That's why I think he's your most likely bet to be the second leading scorer on the team, just by minutes, shots, ability to make shots, all those things. But I hope that we don't see a reversion to what we saw as a sophomore. I hope he stays aggressive, picks his spots, and is that same guy. The last thing I want to say about Media Day, Ryan, pretty clear Trace Jackson Davis has been listening to the show and has stealing your material because he talked about how well he and Race Thompson play together. And just how they move and how they're, almost interchangeable parts, I think might have been a phrase that he used or somebody used. I don't know that I necessarily.
Well, they can switch too.
But they do certainly play very well together. And I think when you have those guys and 3 guards, boy, Indiana's going to be able to play fast and really do a lot of things.
And I think it was the second game last year I came on here and said Trace and Race might be our 2 best post players, and that our best and definitely our best post combo. Now, obviously, Race had to build up and get used to playing, and then he got hurt and had to get back, all of that. But when those 2 guys are on the floor, there's an understanding there. And I'd even throw Jerome Hunter in there at times too. When those 3 guys were on the floor, I thought we played our best basketball when they were on the floor together. And the reason why, they're athletic, they're versatile. You see switching, you see all 3 guys pick up for each other on both ends of the floor, and you see them have an understanding together. And they're all big, they're all athletic, they all have wingspans, all of that stuff. But yeah, Trace and Race, man, I was begging for it from the beginning of the season. And when we did get to see it, especially later in the year, they played very good basketball together. And I think Race is a guy, it's interesting. If Trace doesn't want to guard centers, we saw Race step up and guard centers last year. He's only 6'8", and we saw him guarding centers really well last year. Veteran starting centers in the Big Ten.
How'd that work out for you, Ethan Happ?
Seriously, because he's active, he moves his feet, he is willing to muscle guys, and he's even bigger this year, but he's willing to use his lower half to sort of muscle guys off the block and just not get beaten by pump fakes. And, you have to go over him. You're not going to go around him. And so he's difficult. And then guess what? You miss the shot, he's going to rebound it. He was a Hoover last year on defensive rebounding. So I think that those 2 guys playing together gave us some of our best basketball last year. I think it's going to be even better this year, obviously, as they've both improved. But yeah, that's our best post combo moving forward. I mean, I'm sorry, Joey Brunk, but it's just so much better. And the other thing that was better was the hedging at the top with both of those guys. Trace got better as the year went on, and Race was always good at it. Because he had the speed and the size to recover. And so, yeah, I would agree with Trace. I just think that is a combination that this team needs to see a lot of this year.
Yep. Okay, coming up in our 3rd segment, we are going to answer your questions. We got one about freshman minutes, plus kind of a fun one about the best platoon lineups that we can put together, and a couple of other ones. Fun questions. Stick with us here on the Assembly Call. We'll be right back. Okay, so here's something we can kind of kick around here in the between segment stuff. What do you think is going to be Joey Brunk's role on this team? I was thinking about that as I was kind of watching the Media Day stuff, because all this stuff we're talking about, he's kind of the guy that gets left out, and he's a captain. My assumption all along has been that he's going to start, just because I think Archie's going to be hard pressed to change.
Senior leader, yeah.
Yeah, but, the more I think about it now, the way that they're talking, it's a lot easier to change the starting lineup before a season than during a season. So if he's going to change it, it would be now. And a lot of things point to that potentially being the case. Now, maybe not. Maybe he'll want to start him, alongside Trace so he can take that tougher defensive assignment early in the game, keep Trace fresh, all those things. But, boy, and look, we all appreciate what Joey brings to the table. Indiana doesn't win the Connecticut game last year without Joey. I think the Minnesota game at home, Joey Brunk will be the reason Indiana wins 3 or 4 games this year. He's that kind of guy. But I just think him playing maybe more spot minutes or just it being more matchup dependent, I think is going to be better for this team.
Or coming in when Trace is off the floor, that kind of stuff, so you don't have to have them both in there.
It's funny. Have you guys watched Ted Lasso?
No, haven't checked it out yet.
I've seen some clips. But no.
It's phenomenal. And for anybody who's watched it, there's one scene where Ted Lasso, like, he really doesn't want to bench his aging captain. You know, Coach, you were gonna love this show. Just like it's such a coach's show.
Where is it? Well,
it's on Apple Plus,
but it'll likely move over to Amazon at some point.
Yeah, but it's such a coach's show. But it really got me. The reason he didn't want to do it is just what that would mean for the locker room and what that would mean for this guy and his pride. And you don't want to lose this guy. And I won't give away like what ended up happening, but I thought about Joey Brunk in that situation, how last year we all thought, man, it's so obvious, like get Joey out, put the other guy in. And yet this is where all those things inside the locker room and the chemistry of a group and leadership and what guys mean, it's so hard for us fans to understand that. That's why sometimes second guessing those decisions, it's kind of, we can second guess it all we want because we're fans and talk is cheap and we're just, on here blabbering about. But there are reasons why coaches don't do that stuff. And I'm going to be interested to see what happens with that. Because I think if you start him at the start of the year, it may be hard to change that later on.
Interesting comparison.
How that works.
Interesting comparison here is that all year for the Lakers, they started a 5 next to Anthony Davis because Anthony Davis during the regular season didn't want to play center. And during the playoffs, he was like, I'll play center all you want. But during the year, he didn't want to carry that load and have to face centers every night. So they started JaVale McGee or Dwight Howard next to him all year. And those guys would play like 12 minutes a night, but they would start the game on the opposing center. And then as the game went along, they'd kind of shuffle them to the side. They start both halves and then occasionally come in if they needed some rebounding punch. During the playoffs, they did the same thing, but then they started phasing that out. And in the finals, they started a true stretch 4 next to Anthony Davis a couple nights because it just didn't fit what they were doing. I got to give Frank Vogel, the Lakers coach, credit for doing that because you've got to sometimes change what you're doing based on the matchup. And against the Heat, with all those shooters spread all over the floor, it didn't make sense to have a true center in there. Against the Rockets, with all those jump shooters, they had to start not starting a center because you don't want to start the game off down 12-0 because your center can't go out on the floor and can't guard on the floor and gets lost in switches. I think that's the way Archie has to be. Yeah, in some games, it's going to make sense. I don't like the idea of you have to run the same starting lineup out there every single game. I hate that idea. I've always hated that. I know it's a guy's pride, but you know what? You need to tell guys before the season, hey, guess what? Starting lineup's going to be dynamic. It's going to be based on matchups, not the way you're playing.
Yes, that needs to be the standard.
Yeah.
You can't, if you just pull the rug in the midseason, then it's a bigger deal.
So, Joey, if we're playing, for example, I'm just throwing a team out there, Penn State, and they have a 6'6" center who can go out on the floor and shoot, you're not going to start that game, buddy. I'm sorry. Like it's not about the way you're playing or who you are. Yeah. We have a dynamic starting lineup based on matchups. Teams that do that are the teams that are smart. And again, I know starting lineup doesn't matter. It's who plays the most and who finishes the game, in my opinion. But at the same time, if you let a team get up 10 on you early because you have a bad lineup on the floor just to make a guy feel like his pride is intact and you lose the game by 5 and you gave up a huge run at the beginning, that's your fault. Like that's the lineup.
We've talked about this for 2 years. No, yeah. I agree.
So
I would much rather have a dynamic starting. We had a coach who did that once.
Who did that? Was it Knight?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I wasn't the fan back then. Remember? You got to assume I don't know all the history. I watched Indiana, but I didn't.
Ryan, the part that is the biggest thing that you said for coaches is communication. You're going to have to communicate your philosophy from the start.
Early.
Have communications with your players so they trust you and know you, that when you come to them and say you're either going to make a change or you're going to do something, they're not going to like it, but deep down inside they know who you are and you're program first type of guy. If you just surprise them or act in anger or anything like that, that's when you can lose someone who has been a good component. I just think if you're going to play and talk up a new style, a pace and pick and roll, then you've got to select your 5 best guys
that fit
to
that
get
style.
Started the first half and get started the second half, and it could change game to game and matchup. I'm not saying that, but you can't. I mean, it's his 4th year. He's going to have to win. You can protect a good senior worker, but if you're going to lose games doing that, you won't be around to protect the next senior worker. You're going to you get paid to win games. That's what it is in college. You get paid to win, and you're going to have to make tough decisions. And while I understand,
and guess what? Hey, I'll say this: if Joey's a senior leader, he'll understand.
Absolutely. And you just got to communicate. And you look at his minutes, he averaged 18 or 19 last year. So it wasn't like you could say to him, you're still going to get your 18 to 19, But then from a strategic point, you can put him in and give TJD a break. Or if you have a matchup against a second unit from someone where you can go two bigs and pound it inside and use Joey's, I mean, you can now pick and choose where he's going to be more successful. Or a team doesn't run as many pick and rolls from the 6-minute mark to the 10-minute mark. That's where Joey can go in and defend a little bit better. Now his minutes become more productive, but you're going to have to communicate that. That's what I would lean. Again, we're not in the gym. We say that all the time, but it also then depends on, is Race okay with starting? Is he a guy that'll be okay pressurized, or is he better coming off the bench? There's a lot of dynamics into that, but I'm leaning, obviously get your best players on the floor as fast as you possibly can and make adjustments after.
Go
yeah,
Braves.
and maybe it'd be, look, Joey's a really good offensive player, and maybe him feasting for a couple minutes at a time on backup big men, that can be a nice little offensive punch for you, So, but yeah, everybody watched Ted Lasso. I didn't know what to think about that show, but I saw so many people saying it was great. Heather and I watched it. It's like it's the most that we've laughed like out loud at a sitcom since I can't remember. I don't even remember when. We were so sad when the season was over. Like, what are we going to watch now? It's really good.
Well, they've renewed seasons 2 and 3, so you're getting 3 at least. But I will say that when they got me. I don't have Apple TV Plus, but I'll have to get it when it comes out on for download. I'm sure they'll put it on Amazon or something like that.
We got like a free year with Verizon or something. So you may want to.
I'll look, but I will say the time that they did the Allen Iverson practice speech, they worked that in there without mentioning it. They just worked that in there, and somebody put together online the like overlay of like the two speeches, and it was amazing. It was unbelievable.
So, what's funny about that is we're watching that, and Heather's kind of confused because it didn't
fit.
It didn't quite fit like the scene.
And the message is that Ted Lasso's watched that speech and then decided to deploy it on his guy and not say anything about it. Like, that's the best part is they didn't later mention, hey, coach, was that the Allen Iverson? They didn't say anything about it. They just inserted it and expected the viewer to be smart enough to know what was going on. And I like I like shows that don't take that like allow their viewers to be smart and don't like spoon feed them what they're doing. Yeah.
Yeah. I showed it to her afterwards, and then she got it and thought it was funny.
And it was like it was almost word for word too.
Joseph's in here saying that he loves the beard. Joseph is lying to you, Ryan.
Yeah, I know. I'm not lying. I'm not lying to myself. I don't like it. I want to get rid of it. It's the hair that's the problem.
Oh man.
Oh, guys,
how are the Lions going to do this week, Coach?
It's not backwards, and I don't have a pen. It's not. I am way more competent.
Okay, but put it backwards for just a second so everybody can see what I saw when I signed in, because it's definitely.
Because it's not. It's not.
And the sweatshirt.
Beard.
Matt Patricia.
And it's wide too. The beard gets wide and fluffy like Patricia.
Yes, it does.
I have a pen somewhere.
Okay.
Let's
hop into this.
There you go. There you go.
There you go. There you go. Matt Patricia.
Oh, Matt Patricia. Go Braves. Go Braves.
All right. So we have about 8 minutes for this segment, gentlemen. So we'll get to as many of these questions as we can. Okay. All right, you guys ready?
Yep.
All right, let's do it.
This is Ethan Happ, and I never listen to the assembly call, especially the episodes that Ryan is on.
All right. I'm Jerod Morris. Here with the coach Brian Tonsoni and Ryan Phillips. You're listening to the Assembly Call. Remember that you need to be subscribed to our email newsletter. We send out a weekly IU news roundup, even during the offseason. And after every game, we send out a detailed post-game analysis. Just text IU to 66866 or go to assemblycall.com. That's IU to 66866 or go to assemblycall.com. It's time now, gentlemen, for the mailbag. All questions were submitted via our private IU basketball discussion community, which you can learn more about at assemblycall.com/community, or got one from Twitter. And also, I submitted my own question this week, and that question is this. Let's say, hypothetically, that Luka Garza stays for a 5th year and then were to break Calbert Cheaney's all-time Big Ten scoring record. Does it count? Would it count?
According to the NCAA, yes. So sadly, Jerod, I would not consider it counting, but apparently the Big Ten and the NCAA would. But guess what? He's not staying. He's going.
I know.
Luca Garza is not a pimple on Calbert's backside.
Wow. Wow. Shots fired.
Done.
Okay.
Luca Garza
that's the drop of the year, and the season hasn't even started yet.
Luca Garza didn't take shrapnel. He got the whole bomb right there.
Wow. All right. I had like a whole kind of detailed answer I was going to give, but we're stopping with coaches. That is the answer because you are absolutely right, Coach. Okay. Okay, this question from Joel. Not including Christian Lander, will Indiana have a freshman averaging more than 5 minutes playing time this upcoming season? What do you think? Okay.
I don't know who, but yes, definitely.
You think there will be one? That's
Yeah,
Trey
somebody will
Galloway,
step up.
Anthony Leal, or Jordan Geronimo.
Yeah, one of those guys will step up and fill a role. I mean, Geronimo's the biggest question mark because we just don't know how developed he's going to be when he steps on campus, when he stepped on campus and when he gets to playing. I don't think there'll be a red shirt from any of them, but who knows how much he's going to be able to impact the game other than being super athletic. I know he's got a jumper, but we'll see. Leal can knock down shots, we know, and he's a tough kid. And then Galloway can play defense and provide energy. I think those two guys are the most likely. And but Geronimo could be the best of the bunch. There's a big question mark with him, especially given the competition he faced in high school and all that stuff. I think he'll be fine long-term, but how it's going to be as a freshman is a question mark. Leal and Galloway could easily average more than 5 minutes.
It's going to be Galloway.
Yeah, I think so too.
Defensive player.
Yeah, that's what I think too.
I don't know. Did you guys watch the clip of practice? There was like a minute-long clip of the first practice. There's lots of stuff going on. All I saw was the floppy hair of Trey Galloway. Just
was it like this,
moving fast,
Jerod?
doing
Was it
stuff.
Like this?
That was slightly more kempt than that.
Okay.
I think.
All right.
But
All 11 players last year averaged over 8 minutes a game. Now, not all played every game. Demezi only played 18, but all 10 players played 27 or more games, including Deron Davis playing 31. I haven't heard Coach be committed to playing 11 like he was last year. He said he was going to play 11, and he played it early, and then he cut back the rotation. So it depends on his rotation, how he's going to do that and how many he's going to play. But even then, I think there's room, given a special night where Trey might play 10 or 11 and then not play a next game, and that average comes out to 5. So I would expect everyone to average over 5 if the games played that you need to watch and what games they do play in as freshmen.
And even if you average it out, if you wind up averaging it out over all the games, so it's even if they didn't play in that game, you give them the stat and divide it. I still think they're over 5 minutes. I think both of them are. I think that it's going to be very interesting to see what happens with this roster and how it shakes out and who gets paired with who on the floor and who those freshmen play best with and who they get paired with. Because, look, here's the thing. I'll tell you this, and I haven't felt like this in a long time about IU. There's 11 guys that I like on this team, that I like the way they play, and I feel confident with the way they play, and I feel like they could impact the game, whether it's making one big play or whether impacting it for 5 minutes solid. This is a team with 11 guys I really like. Now, we haven't seen the freshmen a ton, but just incoming, you look at them and you think, okay, they have a discernible skill that can help this team. This guy, all have discernible skills that can help this team. I haven't felt like that in a long time with an IU roster, and I feel like this year it's here.
when we play Iowa, I want Archie to just tell Trey Galloway to just go shadow Jordan Bohannon for the entire game. Don't let him get the ball. If he gets it, you're 6'5", you're in his face. Don't let him shoot. All game.
All game.
He can handle it. Okay, this is from Chad. He says, IU could have a very balanced roster to the degree that they could do a hockey-style line change in an A and B squad type of subbing, with the caveat being that everyone lives up to their current expectations. Build your balanced A and B squads. So let's see. This obviously isn't going to happen. We're not going to do the platoon-style thing that Kentucky did, but it was kind of fun to try and put together really balanced teams. So here's what I came up with. Curious to see what you guys. My team A is Lander, Armon Franklin, Jordan Geronimo, Race Thompson, and Trace Jackson Davis. Basically get your best athletes on one lineup and let them go. And then my other lineup would be Rob, Al, Trey, Anthony, Jerome, and Joey. A little more shooting, a little more skill. You're obviously not as athletic, but you try and make up for that with style, shot making, some of that stuff.
And that second team's a little more savvy too, I feel like. A little more veteran savvy on it with a shooter, and then Jerome, who's kind of and Trey. Yeah.
Yes, I couldn't figure out a better way to balance them than that. But
balance is the key part of that question, but throw Ryan's suggestion in and put the four freshmen out there with one of your post players and go havoc. You know, like the old VCU stuff. Just go trap, press, run and shoot for 2 or 3 minutes. Just change the the course of a game. That would be cool to see.
Last question here, fellas. This is from Blake. 2021 is looking to be a boom or bust year recruiting-wise. Do you think IU can land a commitment from Aminu Muhammad, Trey Kaufman, and Mason Miller? I mean, I'm thinking maybe he meant or. Because if we get all three of those guys, that would be pretty good.
We'll shove those seniors the next year eligibility right out the door to get that.
Yeah.
No, I think they'll get one at least.
Right.
For sure. I don't know who. I don't, right now. The thing is that with kids not being allowed on campus right now, or being allowed for officials and all that stuff and all the restrictions, there's no hints on what they're doing, because usually actions speak louder than anything. If a kid's hanging out around campus all the time, even if he says that's not his leader, if he's hanging out on campus a lot, that's his leader. And so actions speak louder than words. You can talk nice about a team all you want, but if you're not,
that happened with Trace. Like, he was always on campus, always hanging out.
Yeah, and
he's not going to Iowa.
So the problem is there's no hints on where they're going because there's no action. So we'll see, because every kid says, oh, they're recruiting me hard. They're doing this. They're doing really well. I love that coach. I love that. You hear that about every team that's recruiting them, because they're not going to say anything negative. So I would say that, we don't know, but one of those guys I feel like will end up a Hoosier.
Ed Hopkins to that mix, and I think we get one of those four, but if we get two of those four in any combination, that's really a big year with Duncombe coming in. So I think it's still looking good, and we're still competing for the top guys.
I think
whether we get them or not.
Probably going to Kentucky, I would think. I mean, Kaufman is obviously the most likely. He's the one that you would expect. And then if you can get either Muhammad or Miller, those are two really highly regarded players. So, yeah, you got to get one of them. Like, to avert disaster, you have to get one. If you get two of them, you'd feel really good coming in there alongside Duncombe. Okay, that's going to have to do it for us on this week's episode of The Assembly Call. If you want to see us do the show live, join us at assemblycall.com on Thursday nights for the live broadcast of our Assembly Call radio recording. And don't forget to go to assemblycall.com or text IU to 66866 to join our free email newsletter. Special thanks to Bob Thompson for producing most of the music that you hear on the show, and thank you for listening. We will talk to you again next Thursday night. Until then,
take it from me, native Hoosier Mark Titus. Keep your elbows in and your eyes on the rim. And go Hoosiers.
Thanks, Mark.
Thank everybody for coming out.
All right, I got to get out of here, folks. Thank you.
I don't like carrots.
All right. Good to be back. Good to be back. I feel like Jerome Hunter a little bit, out for a while, just trying to get my legs back under me, ready to shoot when I'm open, but a little rusty.
Versatile.
Yeah, versatile.
The Atlanta Braves, for everybody not watching, are now up 5-1 on the Dodgers, and Clayton Kershaw has exited the game. So yet another playoff meltdown for Clayton Kershaw. Let's give him a round of applause.
Why has he been so bad in the playoffs?
I don't know.
Like, what is it?
I think it's mental at this point.
Yeah, it's got to be. Like, maybe just some random chance at the beginning in a small sample size, and then it got in his head. Yeah, I would think that maybe early in his career he melted down because it's later in the year. You pitched a lot of innings, and maybe you're just a little worn out. Yeah. But I did an article on it the other day about when he skipped that start, about how that's just more proof that he's unreliable in the postseason. And again, it's an injury, but it's added to the list of things that make him unreliable. And his ERA in closeout games is 5.77. It's the second worst of all time behind Tim Wakefield at 6.75. And Wakefield was a soft tossing knuckleballer. This is a guy who's an all-time great future Hall of Famer, easily first ballot future Hall of Famer. And he's just terrible. And he gets worse by round. His ERA is higher every round. And yeah, it's crazy. I don't know what it is. I don't know what the reason is, but it's now 6-1. He's no Mark Burley.
I think he got marked with 5 of those runs, but I'm not sure. It might be 4.
Hey, Tony La Russa is coming to your White Sox, Jerod.
Is that? Are they just interviewing him? Because I heard.
I don't know.
It's getting a lot of buzz.
I heard AJ Hinch was the whole reason they fired Rick Renteria, so they could get that cheater in there.
On my White Sox text thread with Alex and Rick Bozich, it feels like it might be real.
I heard it was Cora and Hinch were the reason they fired
heard that
Renteria.
too.
And both guys, massive cheaters. I think it would be a bad idea, but they're good.
Just bring Ozzie back. Like, if those are the options, bring Ozzie back.
There's a lot of trash cans around the guaranteed rate field, that they could use if Hinch shows up to increase the batting average.
I hope.
All right, guys.
There's got to be better options than that.
dinner is on the table, so I have to.
What are we having?
Yeah, what's for dinner?
We're having shrimp, some leftover steak that my mom gave us, rice, and some salad.
Nice.
The cook is right over here. I will not show her on camera because she'll yell at me.
Fair enough.
All right, guys.
All right. Tell Madeline we said hi.
Listened and watched. Love you. We will tell Matt. I will tell Matt.
Thanks, Chat Mob.
Yep. Thanks for being here. We'll see you guys all next week. Hopefully we didn't blow all the news in 1 week, and now we have
no
to talk
kidding. There'll
about
be no scheduled, nothing. We'll have to.
We'll keep breaking down player comments from media day.
Yeah, you haven't been around for the last 7 weeks when we've been hurting for stuff to talk
I know. I just swoop in on the week when there's
swoop
actually
in on the
stuff
big
to talk
week.
about.
Yeah, I see how you are.
Actually, we could do some Big Ten team previews. Just kind of go around the conference a little bit, talk about some of the teams. Why Iowa's overrated. Everybody knows why Iowa's overrated.
Yeah.
All right. Well,
all right,
y'all have a
we'll
good night.
you.
Coach, good to see you. Get better with your affliction.
Yeah, I'll be all right. I'm just old. Hi, it's tailgating. No tailgating.
It's not COVID, by the way. It's
no, it's plantar fasciitis. Yeah, it's not COVID. Knock on wood.
Yeah, knock on wood. Exactly.
All right, we'll see you.
All right, see you guys.